Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. In these particular series, I'm speaking with CEOs from across the globe to gain extra insight into their businesses and what life is like as a CEO from what some people would say during some pretty strenuous times over the last couple of years. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Freedman, who's the co-founder and CEO of Ondefend. Chris, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Everyone will probably comment on this post video, but obviously you've just been away. I haven't, so hence the good tan. You're looking good. For those that don't know who you are, Chris, would you like to give a super quick introduction into who you are and what you currently do?
Sure. Again, co-founder and CEO of Ondefend. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I often joke that if I worked for me, I would probably fire me. So I've been forced into entrepreneurship. Various entities I've scaled and grown. Cybersecurity was something in 2016 that we thought was very interesting. We wanted to do something good for the world. We wanted to do it globally. And the need for this was apparent. We looked at sort of the three sects of information security. I always think of it like that, right? So you have sort of prevention, you have monitoring, and sort of a response, incident response type of thing, forensics. And we decided we wanted to build something where we could provide true value in consulting for prevention. And we wanted to eventually build software that's solving a problem maybe that no one else has solved the right way. And so that was why we founded Ondefend back then, and we've been scaling to those goals ever since.
Okay, we'll dig a lot deeper into that. So what is it that the business does then?
Sure. So when we founded as a pure play consulting firm with a focus on technical testing, right? Network penetration testing, application testing, dynamic static code testing, cloud testing, human testing, every form of preventative testing, right? Then we moved into consulting, compliance assistance, a lot of tabletop exercises, risk assessments, and so forth. And a couple of interesting things happened during our journey. One, right after we were born, one of the largest accounting firms in the world bought the largest accounting firm where we are in Florida, United States. And they found out about us and they said, look, we need some help on testing. We don't have the right teams. We were remote before it was cool, right? Before 2020. And so they needed some help around the US and they started throwing projects over the wall to us. We did a pretty good job. I guess good enough for them to fly in and offer to acquire us. We politely declined because we were like a year-old services company. And they said, well, can we private label you? Can we white label you under our brand to deliver services to our customers? And I thought, what a great way to scale a company, right? Under somebody else selling for you. So we did that very successfully. And so a lot of what we do today, a lot of companies around the world private label us to deliver services under their brand. We also deliver services directly. So we have an entire services division. Also, during that time, I mentioned penetration testing. We were doing a lot of penetration testing, and we were finding more often than not that security controls, the technical security controls, the tools, weren't always responding. For example, we had one customer where we did a pen test and we got right on the network. We were just probing, and suddenly we're on the network. We were blown away by that. And during the out briefing, we found out that they had a customer in town that had to get like a Chromecasty thing on the TV in the conference room. They couldn't do it. So IT turned network access control off. Well, guess what? After the meeting, they never turned it back on. So network access control had been off for 4 months, things like that. And so having the request of, hey, can you build something that can solve to that, which to your note was the breach and attack simulation tool we call Blind Spot. That was also born during our journey as well. So we are a services company and we are now a SaaS software solution company as well.
Okay, so you've got quite a few, I don't really like this saying, but you've got quite a few strings to your bow, I guess, and different services you can offer, and you work with a few partners across the globe, I guess, to offer that service.
Yeah, services that are sort of I think of them as traditional security services.
Sure.
And then we also have this product Blind Spot that's breach and attack simulation, aka purple teaming or alert validation. And we provide that as a product. But what's really neat is we're not just your typical SaaS company. We have a team to provide it as a managed service, which is critical for these blue space technologies that Gartner has really high up in the hype chart. But inevitably, they fall into this trough of discontentment, because they're new technologies, they're still evolving. And so we're kind of skipping the trough and going right into the accepted with our product and a managed service to deliver.
Okay, that's awesome. So we come on to, I guess, let's talk about the blind spot product. Um,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
essentially, how would that work? If I was a client, let's say someone who doesn't really know what steps they need to take from a cybersecurity standpoint, they want to get to a certain area. What would blind spot do for me as a business?
You have you as a business have invested in the best in class security tools, right? EDR, SIM, firewall, AV, all of these tools in your arsenal, right? Most companies sort of set them and more or less forget them and wait for an alert to pop up, right, or something to be blocked. And we found that more often than not, they weren't working. And we would find, wow, the tool was misconfigured, either out of the box or it became inconfigured correctly. I mean, incorrectly. So it was missing attack activity. Like once somebody was on the network, which inevitably was going to happen, it wasn't detecting anything. And then we found the control changes, right? Things were happening in the background by IT, by a third-party MSSP. Things are just happening in the environment. It's dynamic, right? Ever evolving. Then we have found that, okay, well, if the EDR is detecting, guess what? Sometimes the alert is not going to the SIM, the central pane of glass. It's going to its own console. And guess what? No one's looking there. Or maybe it finally got to the SIM, but the ingestion slowed it down by 8 hours or days, weeks sometimes. Well, the event's over,
Mm,
right? So we just found that when we interviewed security leadership, when we found these problems doing normal traditional pen testing, we found like the three things that really are their pain. One, as a security leader, you've done these things. You correctly invest in these tools. You got policies, you got humans watching over the tools, but they wanted operational assurance that everything was working as they planned. And they didn't have that, right? Maybe once a year during a pen test might expose that, right? But pen tests really only tell you truly how they can get in the environment. And then if there's a vulnerability in the device, what a pen test doesn't tell you is, holy moly, did the device actually detect attack activity and did it alert anyone, right? So they wanted operational assurance of that. The second thing it did is often they get downward pressure from security leadership about the investments.
mm.
Holy moly, Charlie, you're spending a lot of money. Prove it's working. So before they'd have our pen test report. Well, here's some findings of remediation in like a spreadsheet. Hard for a layperson to understand that. So what we've done is we visualize, literally visualize all of their investments, their success rate and failure rate against real world threat actors, which has done two things. It's one, shown like, hey, it's working, or it can prove it's working, or in a lot of cases, we prove the need for investments, which has been amazing for us. So like
Wow.
I've been pushing to get investment. There's this security coverage gap I have here. They've not been able to express that. We clearly visualize that some tooling or investments are missing. And then the third thing, and this is the last one that we heard from security leaders, was a lot of times somebody in their industry would be breached by a like a ransomware threat actor, let's say Conti, whatever the ransomware actor is, and it's in the news. And then they get a call from the board or the executives in the company, Charlie, are we ready for this threat actor that just crushed somebody in our industry? And you're like, yeah, we think so. We've done everything we think right. Well, with our blind spot, we have recreated all the tactics and techniques, the literally attack chains of all the major ransomware threat actors, supply chain threats, APTs, everybody, right? And so that way it enables them to literally that day, well, you want to find out, we'll just run it automatically in our environment. We're going to run Conti ransomware, and we're going to see all the tactics and how they worked and not based on thresholds that we have in our environment. And then visualize where the problem is, how to fix it.
That's
Does that make
brilliant.
sense? So
Yeah.
solving those three problems.
That's awesome. So if I'm a customer, and say for example I'm in a bank or I'm an insurance organization, I've got my foundational security posture, I've got my outsourced or in-house SOC, I've got my team, I've got my risk team, and all my tools and everything. Essentially, I'll give you a call and say, hey, can you come validate this? Take a look at this. Be that extra set of eyes and make sure one, it's even working correctly. Two, where like almost like a gap analysis as well. Identify what's wrong with it, and it's all singing and all dancing. And then also I
Yes.
can say, oh, hey, Chris, some of our competitors or similar organizations have been hit by whatever threat actor. Can you also simulate that on our environment and make sure we're going to be okay? That's essentially your blind spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are proving what is your actual mean time to detect against real world threats targeting your industry, which is really important, like the ones targeting you, not the ones targeting everything. And then the second thing is, what is our mean time to respond? I'll tell you an interesting fact, okay? So it's one thing if you have your own SOC team. Now, when you go down market a little bit, right, to the lower enterprise mid markets, they have third party MSSP MDR providers. right? I mean, the majority of the market is depending on a third-party provider. So you'll get a kick out of this. So our tool, Blind Spot, was used during tabletop exercises by some of the big firms out there to like emulate the attack instead of pretending it's happening, which is kind of a cool way to run a tabletop, like run a technical tabletop one week and then come informed to the real one. What we noticed as they went down market, when companies had MSSP MDR providers, they'd run the attack, and as part of the tabletop exercise, obviously they need a notification or a response. They weren't coming. They weren't coming, Charlie. Either they weren't coming or they were way over the SLA, like days and days or hours. So we were blown away by that fact in a big way. So obviously what we're trying to do is, instead of having nebulous tests that are out there that really no one beyond the technical people can understand, is let's figure out what the threat actors that are targeting us specifically. Let's test against them, making sure all of our infrastructure is ready for them and resilient. And then let's just start checking them off the list. I mean, what a novel way to go at this, right? Just start checking them off and becoming prepared. So that's the concept overall of breach attack simulation.
Okay, but before we come on to talking about the market and how responsive they are, the market
Mhm.
is to your service. If I
Yeah.
if I was just starting an organization and we had zero security posture, right? Um, would that still work? If I was right at the start and it's a startup and say, right, come in and validate us or see what we need. Obviously, there's going to be loads of to-dos list, right? And lots of actions needed. But would that work as well, or would it be more inclined toward businesses that already have something in place?
Well, something in place is a pretty broad, description. If you don't have security controls, right, then there's nothing for us to really validate for you, right? So if you don't have tooling or if you don't have an MDR provider, so I would say like there are smaller firms that are just starting that have literally outsourced everything to an MSP or an
Sure.
MSSP, that are housing tools and managing it for them. That's where we would just emulate something once a month just to make sure they're seeing it and responding, right? And then
Yeah.
as you go up, and if the customer's managing your tools and they have an MSSP, yes, we can do the same thing, but what we can do is integrate to those tools,
Yeah.
right? And we can every day run activity to make sure the tools are connected, that the EDR is seeing activity, that the SIM is getting telemetry, it's firing alert, and all that's happening with an acceptable timeline. We can do that validation. What's amazing every day. And I have a metaphor for you that we use, right? It's almost like your home security company, one of the big ones in the US, ADT, and they're
Mhm.
global, but it'd be like a home security company every day coming to your home and opening all your doors and windows and moving, checking the sensors just to make sure everything works. When you sleep better, we built something that does that every day. It's coming in, it's analyzing all of your tools, making sure they're ready for attack activity, make sure the detection learning rules are firing end to end and in a viable timeline. I
Mhm.
mean, that is honestly, to be honest with you, what's troubling for me, and it's happening in Europe, which is exciting. US is always years and years behind, right? Truly, um, is compliance requirements, right? So compliance requirements typically say, Charlie, do you have these controls in place? Once a year, okay, good. You're good. Well,
Mhm.
compliance does in no way mean you're secure, right?
Sure.
Where compliance will be going in the future, and we're seeing that with the DORA Act in Europe. We're seeing some other things happening out there where it is starting to say, hey, not only do you have to have these controls in place, either internally or managed by a third-party MDR provider, but we need you to verify it's working on a consistent basis. We're
Sure.
very excited about that because that's where we believe compliance should be. Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. He at least got that right. So I believe compliance will be heading in this direction. That will be saying, hey, Charlie, you got to have these things in place, but you also have to prove they work on a regular basis because guess what? Your environment is ever changing and dynamic, and the bad guys are always having new testing techniques. Let's make sure we're aligned and optimized against all of that. So we're excited about the future.
That's great. And there's always new technologies coming out, right? Every single day, there's something new that I hear, or new investments being made here or there. And I think we held an innovation forum a few weeks ago, actually, and we kind of came to the conclusion around like tech debt, and people. There was a consensus within the UK and Europe actually where they have a business will have an issue and they need to invest in technology to fix that. So I think
Right.
there's an argument for the industry to actually sit there, pause, validate what they have, test what they have before they then go out and invest X amount of money into new technology and still not have that validation. So I think it's really good what Ondefend are actually doing. So looking forward to seeing the success. Um, what's the plan for the business in the next 5 or so years?
Well, I'll tell you, breach and attack simulation in general, which is again new, relatively new to the markets, right? Has been reserved by our competition and us originally to just the top, Fortune 500, right? The companies that have a mature enough team that can manage a tool like that, which is an issue, right? That have the budget because they're drastically expensive quite often. So we noticed a couple of things. We noticed that these products, a lot of our competitors were churning out fairly quickly. The resellers that we talked like, wow, they're getting them, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And guess what? They're churning out because they just don't know how to manage them. They don't have reporting. So what we've thought about is, yes, we can serve those upper enterprises, but we're thinking about everybody else, right? The rest of the market down triangle, right? So what we've done is obviously the managed service component, right? So we are growing that. Like, let's provide this as a managed service to make sure they're successful and not only finding the issues, but removing the issues, right? The other thing we've tried to do is figure out what are more bite-sized versions of breach and attack simulation people can engage. So this concept I just mentioned earlier, we call it alert validation. So attack simulations, we emulate these threat actors, and what we do is we find sort of new data sources that you might need. We find coverage gaps, tooling issues. We do all of that, right? So that'd be like the home metaphor. We try to break in, we try to chainsaw holes, we try to go down your chimney with a drone to do stuff. That's what that is. But what we found is it takes human interaction to make that work on both sides. Alert validation is something where we integrated the tools, and every day we're just end-to-end testing every detection alerting rule you have across your EDR, across your SIM, and then as your provider responding, like end-to-end, and all that happening at an acceptable timeline. This is automated. This is something that somebody could, we're building a store and we're going into the Microsoft store and places like that. Someone could just download, try before they buy, right? And it just works. And what you have is an uptime report every day or every week or every month, whatever you want, cadence of, look, Charlie, everything's functioning across all our rules. We're in a good spot. Our house is in order. And if something goes wrong, you're notified immediately. So it's really just, you get uptime reporting every month, and then you're just notified, right? That, oh, we got downtime, right? Over here. We got an EDR that's not functioning today, or a rule that failed. So we're thinking we can make that really affordable. Sure. I mean, really affordable, plug and play. You don't need a huge team to run that. And then you can layer in some attack simulations on top of that to test against threat actors to find sort of new data sources, new alerting rules that you need to build that we can toss in there. So that's how we're thinking about this, is not only the big companies can enjoy this, but can we provide this in a way where we have humans to support it, and also automated tooling that's just easy to use and deploy that down market can use. And then obviously the MSSP MDR thing, we call it security monitoring validation, that component for even the lower people, like, let's just run it and make sure they call. I mean, something as simple as that, really affordable stuff that we've made happen, thousands of dollars, kind of pricing versus hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's where we're going, is trying to serve everybody else that's not just the Fortune 500.
Okay, so make the solution a bit more, not digestible, like bite-sized and scalable, and you can layer it to whatever the business needs, I guess.
And accessible,
Nice.
really.
Accessible, yeah.
I mean, financially and just based on your team, accessible and then providing like usable, actionable data.
Yeah.
That's key too. Yeah.
That's exciting. Can't wait to watch it over the next few years or so. So how's the market been for you personally as a CEO? Some of the markets across the globe over the last 2-3 years have been quite challenging, right? Unprecedented times, all that kind of stuff. What's
Right.
what's been the best thing about being a CEO, and what's been the worst over the last few years?
Well, okay. Well, the best thing, obviously, I mentioned before, is the spirit of being able to create and solve problems has been from birth. So I love solving a problem that's out there, right? And so that enables me to proactively do that. The ability, we have not, this is kind of an important thing from my point of view. All of my friends that are in the industry that have, software solutions have, third-party capital, right? In some way, venture capital and so forth. And we haven't. We've self-financed ourselves the entire way because we are a services company that also has software that is sustainable. A lot of these software companies, Charlie, it's kind of amazing. They're like more ARR, grow, grow, grow. It doesn't matter if the business is sustainable. Oh, and by the way, your customer service goes when you have those models, because you're only trying to make more annual recurring revenue. So the fact that we've been sustainable, I have enjoyed building a sustainable business versus just answering to a venture capital and a board of growing revenue only. That's really not me. So that's something I've enjoyed because I've been able to make those decisions as a CEO and a co-founder.
Sure.
That's the good.
That's really interesting,
Plenty of
actually.
bad things too, by the way.
Yeah, before we come on to the bad things, or I guess I don't want to say bad things, any advice that you'd give to anyone else in the kind of in the same boat, what advice would you give to someone who's starting a business? They're being approached by VCs or PEs or whoever it may, angel investors, and they like the look of your product or business or whatever that may be. 'Cause there must have been times where that's happened to you and you thought, oh, actually, we could take this money, invest it in growth, and dilute the service offering. It doesn't always dilute it, but what advice would you give to someone, or at what point did you sit there and think, well, actually, no, we don't need that. We can do it organically. We want to keep the service offering as it is. Talk me through that thought process.
Well, first of all, it's helpful to have partners.
Yeah.
And it's important that if you're going to join with one or more people, that
Mm.
those people have the requisite skill sets that are different than yours, that
Sure.
you're complementary of each other. Right? All too often, I see people with the same technical skill sets, but maybe they don't have the marketing, sales, or business skill set, or whatever the thing is. So I think being diverse and holistic there is really important. I think I always like to say fail quick and fail cheap, as cheap as possible. So a lot of times when somebody's building something, they have a vision of what the market wants and they build it really far into it, right? A lot of time, energy, and even their own money. And then they say, here, market. And the market says, I don't like that. Or I wish it was a lot, systematically different.
Mm.
So I'll tell you, with Blind Spot, frankly, we sold Blind Spot as a PowerPoint to our first customer. It was a PowerPoint of a concept. Here's the problem we're seeing with you. Here's how I think we could solve it with software. They were loving it. Like, hey, I'm a CISO. I want you to do this purple teaming all the time. I can't afford you humans to do it. So we were aligned on that. So we kind of designed it on a PowerPoint, sold it, and then built it in a corporate environment, multiple corporate environments,
Yeah.
actually, which is a great way to build a product. Because what you have is we're building an environment. We have sort of the technical team, we have the CISO, we have the board, all commenting on how we do it and the deliverables. And that was key. So I would suggest anybody that's coming up with either product market fit or service market fit, do your research. Do your research, interview as many people as possible to find the common problem that's solvable, that they'll pay money for, that won't churn out, all of the sort of variables. Possibly they could be a low cost of acquisition for you as a business. You've got to think about all that before you go too deep into building something or risking something.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love the fail quick and fail cheaply. I think as a co-founder myself, I hate the idea of failing or making a mistake. 'Cause if the second I do that, I think, oh gosh, like the world's falling down. But actually,
Right.
you really learn from it, right? And I think as co-founders or as anyone within organizations, you need to make mistakes to learn, and mistakes are okay. So I think society's got this idea of perfection, right? And
Yeah.
that's never a true reality. And partners
I
as
mean, you can have advisors that can maybe help you,
well.
but also some advisors either out or maybe outdated, maybe are one-sided, maybe and so you can't just rely completely on them. So when I say gather data, not only from customers, from advisors, from what you can read and learn up on, I mean, it's a holistic way of thinking about how am I going to solve a problem in the market.
Yeah, I think you definitely got to do your research, right? I'm not saying make business decisions without making any kind of calculated risk or research. You've definitely got to do it, but if you do that, it's okay, right? And you fail, you learn from it and move on.
You increase your odds quite a bit.
Exactly, exactly. And then the partnerships piece, I think, is really important because a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some organizations within security at the minute are like, oh no, this is our product, this is what we do, we're not sharing it, we don't need anyone's help. Well, actually, if we all work together for a common goal, it's great for everyone. So it's quite a refreshing mentality to have.
I agree. I agree.
Okay. What advice would you give to anyone that's struggling in the marketplace right now? Um,
Cool.
if they've got a product and they're taking it to market, what would you suggest to them?
It's a tough one.
This tough one.
You mentioned unprecedented times. I mean, I think we all believe we were heading toward a recession, possibly a deep recession, and then COVID happened and just weird things, unprecedented things happened in the market. And now we're in this strange time where the variables aren't quite adding up while we're not going into a recession. It's very strange. So what I would you're asking what I would suggest for people that are sort of in this tenuous situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, timing is everything.
Mm.
I mean, right before we went into the recession, or right before rather, right before really the technology hit we just had like a year and a half, 2 years ago, then the banks started failing, right before all that, we actually had VCs come to us, offer us a really good deal, but it was scale, scale, scale. And I asked, well, what if the market shifts?
Mhm.
What then? And they're like, don't worry about that. Like, I'm going to worry about that because that could be a house of cards. So I would suggest, avoid making decisions that could affect the house of cards
Sure.
when you're making your decisions. For example, I always joked around. I would see people like, "Oh my gosh, I got this product. I got this product in Walmart. I'm going to be rich." And then the terms crush their company like
Sure.
6 months later, right? So you have to think about all the variables, the positive and the good, but don't put on just the good lenses. I want you to also think about what could go wrong with the customer or the partner or the market. You have to think about all the variables and how am I hedging against that?
Mhm.
So for us, it was like, okay, we're going to build a product, but we have to have a service arm to support the product. And sometimes we have to slow that down, or we're moving so fast the product we're not servicing our customers right. They're going to churn.
Uh-huh.
So you have to sometimes, I would say to some people, and they don't like to hear this, sometimes you have to slow down
Mhm.
and get your house order before you can speed up. So those are some of the variables you really do have to think about before you put yourself in an untenable situation that may be unrecoverable.
Okay. No, I like that. I think knee-jerk reactions are not beneficial for any business, right? You need to stop, pause, think about what you're doing. Again, do your research and then kind of make the decision from there. But Chris, it's been really good to find out about Ondefend, what you and the team are doing there. I look forward to kind of seeing your success over the coming years. And I'm sure if anyone's got any questions about the service or offering, they can reach out to yourself directly. But thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Always happy to give any advice to anyone that needs it. I love, entrepreneurs. I love business in general, and I want to be helpful. So thank you for this opportunity.